Iranian officials had warned repeatedly, if we're sanctioned, if we're attacked, the strait will be blocked. That threat wasn't taken lightly in Washington. Oil markets panicked, global energy prices surged, and the fear of a full-scale economic collapse loomed. The US saw Iran's control over the strait as a ticking time bomb, one that could crash economies and trigger global chaos. And so neutralizing Iran's naval power became a priority. Airstrikes focused on missile sites, fast attack boats, and radar installations. America wasn't just fighting a country, it was securing the arteries of global commerce. The decision to bomb wasn't only a military one, it was economic survival dressed in military uniforms. Because in today's world, oil flows mean power, and America doesn't easily surrender power. Yet behind the missiles and military might, another war was unfolding, a war of narratives. Iran painted itself as the victim of Western imperialism, rallying its people and allies against American aggression. Protesters poured into the streets of Tehran, waving flags and chanting vengeance. Meanwhile, the US media portrayed Iran as the villain, a rogue state on the edge of nuclear madness. Truth became a weapon, twisted by both sides to justify destruction. Social media platforms flooded with images, burning buildings, dead civilians, weeping mothers. America claimed precision strikes, Iran claimed massacres. The world split between sympathizers and skeptics. Allies hesitated, enemies celebrated. But in the middle of this narrative war were innocent lives, caught, crushed, and forgotten. And the longer the bombs fell, the harder it became to separate fact from fiction. Why did America bomb Iran? The truth perhaps depends on which side of the fire you're standing on. Domestically, the airstrikes provided a much-needed distraction for an American administration facing political chaos. Scandals, declining approval ratings, and economic instability had created a storm within Washington. War, historically, had a way of uniting people, or at least redirecting their anger. The president's advisors knew this, and when flags fly high, criticism flies low, one aide reportedly said. And so, while the reasons for the strike were wrapped in security justifications, political survival was hidden underneath. Bombing Iran allowed the administration to rally patriotism, dominate headlines, and silence opposition. Critics accused the president of playing with lives to protect his legacy. But in a world where perception often matters more than truth, the timing of the strike raised more questions than answers. Iran became the canvas on which domestic politics were painted in blood. The line between leadership and manipulation blurred with every explosion on Iranian soil. For years, Israel warned that Iran's nuclear program wasn't just a regional threat. It was an existential. Mossad intelligence, shared secretly with Washington, showed underground facilities accelerating uranium enrichment. Israeli defense chiefs urged American intervention. Publicly, they smiled and spoke of diplomacy. Privately, they pleaded for war. America and Israel's alliance, forged in decades of shared interest, was now driven by shared fear. The moment Iran crossed the enrichment threshold, Tel Aviv feared a second Holocaust was no longer fiction. It was potential reality. Israel's pressure worked. US policymakers, knowing the cost of losing Israeli support in the region, bent toward action. Bombing Iran was also about keeping an ally safe, and even more, about keeping an alliance alive. It wasn't just about Tehran, it was about Jerusalem too. The strike was a handshake in fire, a promise made in destruction. And Israel, silently watching from the shadows, knew it had been heard. Iran's cyber warfare capability also played a role in the decision to strike. Over the past 2 years, Iranian hackers had crippled American infrastructure, disrupting water treatment plants, power grids, and even targeting airports. The attacks were sophisticated, quiet, and relentless. Each hack didn't just cost millions, it exposed vulnerabilities America could no longer ignore. Intelligence agencies reported that future attacks could target nuclear facilities, satellite systems, and even the Defense Command network. Cyberwar had crossed the threshold from nuisance to national threat. Bombs, they believed, were the only message Tehran would understand. By targeting cyber warfare facilities, data centers, and underground tech bunkers, America hoped to cripple Iran's digital offensive. The strike was as much about code as it was about combat. In a world increasingly reliant on digital infrastructure, the war on Iran wasn't just physical, it was virtual, and America wasn't willing to lose either battlefield. The consequences of the bombings rippled far beyond Iran's borders. China-Russia, longtime critics of American interventionism, condemned the strikes and moved to support Iran. In an emergency session at the United Nations, accusations flew, alliances shifted, and the global order trembled. Iran, though battered, wasn't broken. It retaliated with missile strikes on American bases, activating regional militias in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Oil tankers were attacked in the Gulf. Chaos. What began as a targeted operation escalated into a broader confrontation, threatening to engulf the world in a conflict no one truly wanted. Peace became a distant dream. Diplomacy was left in ruins. The world teetered on the edge of a new kind of war, fought with drones, data, and deadly alliances. America had made its move, but in doing so, it had opened a door that may never close again. Amidst the devastation, voices of reason struggled to be heard. Humanitarian groups reported thousands displaced, hospitals overwhelmed, and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. The Iranian people, caught between their government's ambitions and America's fury, paid the heaviest price. Families fled cities, unsure if the next bomb would take their homes or their lives. Children cried not from hunger, but from terror. The world's empathy was slow and often conditional. Iran's regime was blamed, but its citizens suffered. America claimed to target military sites, but collateral damage told another story. Journalists showed broken schools, shattered mosques, and funerals filled with both hope and hatred. The strike was meant to preserve global stability, yet it shattered countless lives. The cost of war wasn't only in dollars or geopolitics, it was in memories, trauma, and tears. And for those buried beneath the rubble, it no longer mattered who fired first. It only mattered who would help them last. As smoke continues to rise from Iranian soil, the world is left with haunting questions. Was bombing Iran a necessary evil or a catastrophic mistake? Was it a bold stand against tyranny or a reckless display of power? History will judge, but history often forgets the faces of those lost in the flames. What is remembered are headlines, speeches, and victories, never the screams. America bombed Iran not just for one reason, but for a storm of reasons: fear, politics, revenge, oil, alliances, and control. Each reason, when stripped bare, reveals a world unwilling to learn from its past. The world is watching, again, as the cycle of war repeats. Promises of peace are made as weapons reload, and as one chapter of violence ends, another quietly begins. The only question now is, how many more lives will be lost before the world finally learns that real power lies not in bombs, but in restraint? But Iran is not a country that surrenders easily. Within hours of the bombing, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei addressed the nation. His voice was calm yet defiant. "We do not fear death," he said. "We fear dishonor." Across the nation, men lined up to join the Revolutionary Guard. Women wept for their sons, yet vowed loyalty to the cause. The attack had not broken Iran's spirit. It had ignited it. From the ashes of destruction rose a surge of national unity, stronger than any sanctions or isolation could ever achieve. Iran's leadership, once criticized internally, now found itself backed by millions. Even political opponents closed ranks. This wasn't just a war between governments, it had become a war of identities. Iran framed the bombing as proof that the West would never allow a proud Muslim nation to rise, and the people believed it. America may have targeted Iran's weapons, but it struck something far deeper: its pride. America's military might have shown its strength, but now it faced a different kind of enemy, one that didn't wear uniforms or fly fighter jets. Iran's proxy networks across the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias in Iraq, Houthis in Yemen, were activated like hidden mines. One by one, U.S. embassies, bases, and allies came under fire. This was Iran's silent war, its shadow army unleashed. American intelligence warned of a long conflict, not a short campaign. The battlefield had expanded beyond Iran's borders, reaching into every country where Iran held influence. For every bomb dropped on Tehran, a rocket was fired elsewhere. America had opened the gates to a regional inferno. It may have launched the war with steel and precision, but Iran would respond with chaos and unpredictability. This wasn't about who had more firepower. It was about who could endure the storm longer. And in that war, Iran had been preparing for decades. The global economy, already shaky from trade wars and inflation, felt the tremors of the conflict immediately. Oil prices soared overnight. shaking markets from New York to Beijing. Shipping lanes were disrupted, insurances skyrocketed, and investor confidence vanished. Countries dependent on Middle Eastern oil began scrambling for alternatives. Airlines cancelled flights over the Gulf. Panic gripped stock exchanges. The war America thought would secure stability had done the opposite. It had destabilized the entire global economy. Even the American middle class, distant from the desert battleground, felt the impact at gas stations, supermarkets, and job markets. Every bomb dropped carried a price tag, one paid by ordinary citizens. Economists warned that if the conflict prolonged, the world could enter another recession. America's leadership had claimed the strike was necessary for long-term peace, but it had unleashed short-term chaos with global consequences. And in this interconnected world, war never stays contained for long. Within the American military itself, questions began to surface. Soldiers deployed to the region wrote home about confusion and unclear objectives. Are we here to fight terror or provoke it? One Marine reportedly asked. Officers questioned the lack of post-strike planning. The strikes had succeeded tactically, but what came next? No one seemed to know. The Pentagon held briefings filled with confidence, yet behind closed doors, uncertainty lingered. Morale began to fracture. Some veterans who had fought in Iraq and Afghanistan warned that history was repeating itself. A war without an exit strategy was urged. And worse, fighting Iran, a nation with terrain, history and deep pride, wasn't going to be like fighting non-state actors. It was a nation prepared for war on every front, military, ideological, digital and psychological. The fear wasn't just about casualties, it was about purpose. Was this war truly about defense, or had it become a self-fulfilling prophecy of endless violence? In Europe, long-time American allies watched nervously. Germany, France and the UK, while allied with the US, had invested years into diplomacy with Iran through the JCPOA nuclear deal. Now, all of that seemed ruined. European leaders condemned Iran's actions, but also questioned the scale of America's response. Protesters gathered in London, Berlin, and Paris demanding restraint. NATO meetings grew tense. America's unilateral decision to bomb Iran had once again revealed cracks in the West's